Okay, we're about to start, just so you know. We're about to start. Okay. Hey, everyone. How are you? Good-ish, given our world just collapsed. Sorry, elephant in the room, but it is what it is. South Dakota, I see you. I see you. No, they just called it in South Dakota. Yeah, it's pulled. Yeah. Okay, so hi everyone. I am Vickie Howell. I'm moderating this panel. I am a designer and an entrepreneur and an author and a TV show host, and I own a subscription and curated kit and box company called Yarnyay. But I'm moderating this panel because I have worked with indie magazines for the entirety of my 18-year career. I've had columns in Kiwi Magazine, in Interweave Crochet, in Knit One that no longer exists, and Knit Simple that no longer exists, and then contributed to, craft and Vogue Knitting and all number one. I have a huge love for the printed word, and I think that it's really important that we nurture it and keep it going and do what we can to find a way to bridge the gap between tech and paper. So we are here today with some fantastic panelists that I will introduce, and then we'll just dive right in. We're going to open it up to questions at the end too. All right, so first we have Amy Singer. She is the editor of Knitty. She's also the publisher and founder of the magazine. In 2002, it came to her while sitting in her living room couch that she should start an online magazine to feature the knitting talent that she'd been seeing on blogs all over the world in one tidy, professional-looking website, Knitty.com. And here we are 20 years later. As a side note, Knitty was a really important part for me to get my first gig in the industry, which was as the host of Nitty Gritty on HGTV. Because I had my very first pattern design up on the issue at the time. So I love me the Knitty. So Amy Singer. Next up, can we just take a moment? I'm like, I thought my glasses game was good, but geez. Okay, so this is Michelle Morris. Michelle Morris is the editor-in-chief of the colorful fashion sewing and DIY blog, is it the Black Chick or Black Chic?
Chick.
Okay, That Black Chick. This is a platform on which she shares her own fashion, sewing tips, reviews, and tutorials. She's a sewing influencer on the scene who has become known for her loud and unusual prints and her ability to mix and match. In 2017, Michelle took the same idea to the pages of a new sewing publication called SEWN magazine. This multicultural magazine is a space to showcase makers and artists of all colors. So welcome to Michelle.
Thank you.
Next up, I have my fellow Austinite, Megan Fernandez. She's a knitting designer and an author and the co-founder and creative director of Pom Pom Publishing. Pom Pom publishes a quarterly magazine as well as books that present knitting, crochet, and craft in modern, beautiful, and a meaningful way. After 10 years in London, she's now based in Austin, Texas, where she lives with her husband and her two young, gorgeous, amazing, beautiful girls. So, Megan, welcome. And Megan and I only see each other when we're not actually in Austin. It's very weird. Yeah. We have to go to London or where
we had a Zoom in Austin.
We did up. That doesn't count. And then last but not least, we've got Ashley Usling. She is the founder and CEO of Making. Since 2016, Making has grown a loving following in craft industry through a biannual print publication for the everyday maker. Today, Making flourishes through the Making app, an inclusive social marketplace with classes and community for all makers to succeed. So we have a really lovely, diverse panel. So I'm ready to get into it. I think we should just talk about, well, not the elephant in the room, but the other elephant in the room, which is the pandemic. And it's no surprise that print media, well, specifically magazines, really took a hit because our LYSs and fabric shops were closed, and that's where people physically went and got their magazines. So, and there's also a lot that has to happen with people to make a magazine happen. And I've seen some of you do and adapt in amazing ways. So I just wanted to know what your magazine production looked like during the pandemic. I'd like to start with Megan, because what you were doing with photographs in Pom Pom Quarterly was really creative, and it gave it sort of an intimate, we're all in this together feeling.
Yeah, I was already on maternity leave when the pandemic hit, so I was used to being alone with no adults to talk to when it started. And most of my team is in the UK, so we were already really used to communicating via Zoom and having meetings that way. So that part of it was actually a really easy transition for us. But yeah, we have photo shoots, and sometimes there's 10 people that need to come to that, and we were actually having the issue that was going to come out. It was spring, and we were going to do the photo shoot for fall, and we had a guest editor, Ocean Rose, who was based in the UK, and we were so excited about Ocean's, creative direction and what they were going to do on that shoot. And so at first we were really disappointed that that wasn't going to happen, but in the end what we did, the theme for the issue actually before even the pandemic hit was home. So what we did was we sent the knitwear samples to different people around the world, really, whose style we liked. And who we knew could take a picture with an iPhone, like a good picture with an iPhone, and they had photo shoots in their home. Sometimes like their partner would take the photos, or they would just set up a stand and do basically selfies with a remote. But it ended up being a really beautiful issue, and like an incredible reflection of what was going on.
It was cohesive too.
Yeah.
How did you make that happen? How did you make, one of the reasons that you use just one photographer is so that there's this uniformity of sorts, and you really achieve that even though they were completely different. Did you go in with notes? Was it luck of the draw?
Yeah, and I mean none of that had anything to do with me personally, but Ocean did a really great job of creating a mood board for every person who we sent samples to. So there was one cohesive mood board, and then there was one for each person based on where they were located and what they were doing and what she knew about that person, and what they knew about that person, and yeah, just an incredible job. And then we had one person edit all the photos to make sure that they kind of had a similar kind of tone to them, which turned out to be really amazing. So something that I'm really proud of my team for pulling off.
Yeah, and I think that even though like it's like one of those sweat, like make it work moments, it's a beautiful time capsule of society, because you were able to create something beautiful in a time of ugliness. And I think that that's sort of like one of the gifts that came out of pandemic, is that we all had to figure out, like, we are a community of makers, and we really, like, we have to make it work. We had to make it work.
Yeah.
And there's some beautiful things that came out of it. Ashley, how did you, if at all, how did your production change? Or the way that you created your magazines during lockdown happen?
Yeah, I honestly at that point, can you hear me?
Okay.
Honestly, at that point, we were working on, we had to reschedule our fall issue shoot like 3 separate times, and it ended up where we just decided one of us would take it. So Carrie and I, my co-founder, and I usually photograph each issue together, and we ended up deciding, okay, you'll take this issue and just shoot it in Maine, and we'll figure it out. And so we went ahead and did that, but I think the biggest impact was we distribute everything out of our own warehouse in Maine.
Oh.
And so thankfully, like, our printery is in New Hampshire, so they were able to deliver to us still, but packing is usually like this massive team effort, and we couldn't have anyone be there at the same time, so we had to do it in like shifts where like one person would do it at a time, and it really was at like the most critical time that happened. And so usually there's like a little bit of a lull because we have 2 issues a year between, and it was the pandemic, and kind of everything being shut down was happening right when we were ready to ship an issue. So it was very much like make it, and we did it, and it was stressful. I was just telling Marina, who's on our team and here with us, that I realize now I blocked out a lot of what happened during that time.
Yeah.
Like, she was bringing stuff up, and I was like, oh my God, I can't believe, like, I totally forgot about that. But yeah, like, our warehouse was in complete lockdown, like cleaning supply, like signs, everything, like partitions up, like I mean, it was very serious operation there for that issue. But we got through it.
Yeah.
And we shipped it, and we shipped a month late. I mean, that was just like the honest truth of it. It was like, and everyone was really understanding. But then a lot of stuff went, missing because of the postal service.
Because of the postal situation, yeah.
But yeah.
Amy, you have a solely digital magazine. Do you think you felt it in the same way? Did you feel that your production changed? Because you have a very unique model. You've always have had everybody take their own pictures. And
everyone, in our case.
So did you feel like, oh, I actually have the best model possible for this scenario, or did you feel a change?
No, honestly, the only thing I had to deal with, and everybody had to deal with, is the emotional toil and the restrictions and the change in life and the kind of grieving we did for the before times. And that in itself, it just affected how we all dealt with everything. So we bumped the first issue a month. I hadn't changed my schedule for any reason. We couldn't do it in that month. It was just too much.
Yeah.
And other than that, all the designers take their own pictures. All our meetings have been virtual. I mean, my team is in, one of them is in Toronto. I'm now an hour away in Hamilton, and my other partner is in Ann Arbor, Michigan. So we're in the same time zone at least, but we've always met, with Zoom.
Right.
And so we just did our same meetings, but we gave everybody as much slack as possible, and deadlines rolled as they needed to roll. And if we were late, everybody on the internet understood.
Yeah, yeah. Michelle, what about you? Did it affect your publication at all?
It didn't really affect it so much. I think because my model is almost like hers, is that the people that contribute to my magazine, majority of the people that contribute are makers who are out there making their own things, and they are taking their pictures as well. And so I have a few contributors that hire professional photographers, and then some of them take their own pictures and things like that. So that didn't go off. It just was a matter of what was going on, allowing more time. My issues were late, and people were understanding with what was going on. I did have to create on my end a little bit more projects for the magazine because I didn't want to put a burden on anyone during that time to create for the magazine and submit. So it didn't, sales went up actually for me in that area, but productivity and things like that, it just took a little bit longer. I had to do a little bit more, but we worked through it.
Yeah. For those of you that are in print, how have the costs of paper and shipping costs affected your magazine, and also how you are able to support your craft stores and get your same level of product to your beloved consumer?
Well, for us, we print in the UK, and we have really close relationship with our printer, and the prices have gone up a lot for paper, and so we work around a little bit. The paper gets tiny bit thinner. We order in bulk in advance so that we can guarantee the amount of paper that we're going to have for future issues at a certain price. But we did put our price up earlier this year, which, I mean, paper or not, was really long overdue.
Right.
And I mean, it's a little bit for the consumer, but it's a lot for us and for everybody who works with us, and for the designers that we pay, and us paying our staff and ourselves fairly, and paying for things like paper. And then we can also give our shops a larger margin on the cost of the magazine. So it was something that was long overdue, but it was something we were able to build into a slight price increase, cover price increase.
Are you transparent about those reasons so that the stitcher, the consumer, is educated about why the price is coming, that this is so that you can pay people, and this is so?
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you think that's important?
I mean, I would try to be transparent about anything that our business does, just because we try to hold ourselves to a pretty high standard, and if we explain those things, then hopefully people will be understanding and know why something that is a physical product that you can hold in your hands has has the price that it does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What the value is. Ashley, Michelle.
Yeah, my printing prices didn't really go up that much, so I was lucky in that sense. But I too did have to raise my price for my magazine, and it's funny. I've always been transparent because my magazine, it's not a cheap magazine, and I have to constantly explain to them why my magazine costs what it does. But in the end, you know, it's for some people, it's not going to be for some people, but you know, I have to make it work. It's not coming out of my pocket to print this magazine.
Yeah.
You
Word.
know, so
Yeah, yeah. Before we move on, I want to take the temperature of the people that are here. How many yarn shop or fabric shop owners do we have in the crowd? Okay, so what about designers? Okay, okay. All right, or dyers, or graphic art fabric designers. No? Okay, all right. That tells us where we need to go. So we'll talk a lot too about designers. I do want to touch a base a little bit on there. Over the past 5 years, there has been a shift, a much needed shift in our industry to focus on our considerable lack of diversity and nurturing inclusion, and not just for the BIPOC, Black, Indigenous people of color community, but also for abilities, for identity and sexuality, for age, for a broad thing. And since magazines are like physical representations of our industry, I think it's important for us to at least sort of acknowledge and talk about and know that we're having a safe conversation about what we can do, what we shouldn't be doing, and how we're doing it. So whoever wants to start, I would love to know what that looks like for you, just sort of acknowledging that this is where we are at this time, at this place.
I'll take that one.
Yeah.
I'm going to just hold this up.
Can you hear?
See.
Are you able to hear? Okay.
Yeah,
Good.
I think I'm just going to move it up like that, maybe. So making has had a really interesting journey over the last 4 years, and I don't know how many of you were witness, but several years ago, or a few years ago, we were called out on Instagram for a couple things, and one of them was the lack of diversity, and that we had diverse models, but how did we go beyond that? And so even though that was one of the hardest times for us, we were kind of one of the first companies to really be called out, and I think it was really important. It was the most pivotal thing that's happened for our company and had us change a lot over the last 3 or 4 years. And some of the biggest changes that Carrie and I really realized that we needed to make was within the team itself. So at that time, it was just Carrie and I. And as 2 white women, there's just a lot that you can't know or experience or be aware of, all aspects, right? Like, so our view is our lived experience and how we educate ourselves. So obviously there was a lot that we needed to do personally, but also just actual things that we needed to do within the magazine itself. And so we worked over the next couple of years to start hiring a larger team and to bring on a whole team of diverse, what we call sensitivity readers. So having someone from every kind of identifying group that reviews the magazine and the plans for each issue before we even really start production. Because what we were finding is even when we would go through proofreading, sometimes it'd be too late to change anything if there was something that we just, and sometimes these are things that there's no way that we would be aware that were problematic or non-inclusionary, and so that was a big thing that we did, and something that I've recommended to a lot of people is just getting the content in the hands of a diverse group, like earlier on, because it's really important for content that's going to be read by such a large group to go through that process. The other thing that we did was really work at setting goals of contributors and content that we had within the magazine, and setting like really high goals. So not just 1 or 2 people of color, but if we had, 24 contributors in each issue, like making sure at least 50% were diverse, and allowing them to have a lot of creative freedom in the way that they created their projects and what they brought to the magazine. And that wasn't just only in the projects, but also like the artwork and themes and things like that. And so there's a few other things that we have done over the years, but I feel like early on those were the biggest changes that we made, that helped us grow in terms of learning. And then as time has gone on, we've been fortunate. Making isn't just a magazine any longer. We're now a tech company. And so we've been able to hire a larger team and have someone that runs our social media and is on our marketing team, is on like every part of the step. It isn't just a white person's view or someone that identifies as, cis, white, or whatever. So anyways.
How did you bounce back from the Instagram campaign?
Yeah, I think at the point where we were called out, and it wasn't small by any means, but it wasn't a really huge public. It was public, but it got like much larger as time went on. So we kind of were early enough when we were called out to not have seen like how other people were handling it. And right away, I remember the minute it like came to our attention, I was the one doing all the social media at the time, and I remember thinking, there's something that I'm missing here. And it was, we were being called out for something in the magazine. And I was like, and I can't just fix this myself. Like there's something actually greater than me that needs to happen. And at that point, we decided that it was whatever we needed to do to change and go from just being bystanders to advocates was the route that we wanted to take. So not every company needs to become activists or advocates in like a huge public way, but that was the route that we decided to take. And so I don't think it was a matter of bouncing back. I think it was a matter of rebuilding trust, and or if there was already trust there, an element of trust, really being intentional and authentic about that, and having really hard conversations, and really putting ourselves out there, bearing it all. I mean, it's why I'm talking about it, and I brought it up now, because that's the only way over the last 4 years I've learned as a company, especially one that's growing, that you need to be. Like, if you try to just not ever shine the light on something, then you're not going to become more aware or grow.
Right, absolutely.
So,
you got to do the work. Would anybody else like to speak on it? Megan or Amy?
Well, we had a similar, we didn't necessarily get called out, but we made a lot of changes after 2019. There were things that we held as values that were not necessarily integral to like our business model. Some of it came through in how we did our work, but then we made things a lot more intentional, like you said. And like, we just feel like we have such a responsibility to our community and to our readers to do the right thing and to get things right. And like, I'm not a white person, but I definitely did not, and I still don't know it all. And you're right. You need to have a community around you to do it the right way, and to do right by the community and our readers, and by our staff. And I feel like 2019 was actually harder for me personally than the last 2 years, because of what it felt like an earthquake, in our community. But it's all been for the absolute best,
Yeah. Amy, how's this How's it going? Didn't get the words out. How does
More
Knitty? How is Knitty sort of acknowledging this point, this moment?
Well, we started with a different focus, and sometimes, you know, because we're a super tiny team, it's pretty much me and then people who work in on specific projects. I'm stuck with the perspective of a white woman, but I'm also not a traditional body. I mean, I'm a fat person, so we've been doing size inclusive for 15 years. Early on, we started and bumped it up higher than what I was seeing in other magazines. And we're continuing to do that. In terms of diverse voices and faces, one of the things we do is we feature anyone who's going to send in good work. We don't care, age, whatever. However, I am also looking to try to bring in more BIPOC voices because that's been really hard. I'm finding that there is a knitting crochet barrier to some degree. And we are now actively soliciting more crochet. So that, I think, hopefully brings people in a craft that is more suitable to them and also appeals to knitters. And so we're trying to make it multi-craftual in that way. We've also been encouraging people to show themselves when they photograph people. So if someone has a BIPOC friend, someone who's differently abled, someone who's LGBTQ, anything, we would like to see photos of them because they represent a whole bunch of people who read the magazine. So that has been working. It's a struggle trying to get more of that happening.
Well, to jump off your point about the LGBTQ IA+ community, I've noticed. I'm not in publishing, but we do put, we put a booklet out in every box every month, and I've noticed just when we're pattern writing that I've really started to change the terms that I use to be more unisex, and to use sort of like feminine and masculine, but then I always feel challenged, like, well, who are we to say what's feminine or masculine now too? My point being is that we're all in this together, and this is a living, moving thing, and all we can do is talk to people, talk to non-binary folk, or talk to, people in any of the communities and ask like what it means for them, what they would like to see. Yeah. And you can't please all of the people all of the time ever in anything in life, period. But if you're working at it, like that's a step in the right direction. Have any of you changed the way that you select patterns or projects for your blog or print magazine based on gender, being gender neutral? Is that something, is that a move that you see happening at all? Michelle?
I haven't.
Not at all?
I haven't.
Okay.
I just do the things that I've been doing normally, so I haven't made any changes.
Okay.
We have definitely thought about that more, and we almost never had anyone who was masculine as a model, and that's changing a lot. We started, instead of saying bust circumference, we say chest circumference and things like that. And Lydia, my co-founder, and I are both like cis women, and so we've definitely lent towards the feminine side of things. But yeah, we've been trying to change that recently, and it's been great.
Yeah. Anyone else?
I would just say very similar to them. Making is only half knitting and the rest craftual, so I think there's a little bit of like less gender specific on that end, but on the knitting and sewing side, definitely like leaning more towards just even making it more accessible to people that aren't women or identify as women.
Right.
And then we started a second publication called Bright, which is kind of our craftivism publication that really centers women, non-binary, and men, both as contributors and models as well.
We have a lot of designers with us today, so I'd like to switch over a little bit. Although this is a transition, I would like to talk to you, open it up to you towards the end and talk about, from a designer's perspective, if you have changed the way that you think about design and submitting design. But I think that things have changed how you submit to magazines now. I mean, it was, when I started out, you had to like put together this whole thing. You had to mail it in, and there's things, and now we've got, like, you can tag people on social, and it's just a whole different thing. So what are you looking for when you're looking for contributors, tech editors, designers? Let's start with Michelle, for your publication.
I'm looking for everything and everybody. No, but yeah, I look for someone who is just creative. I mean, if you make no matter what kind of art you make, I feature a lot of artists who sew, a lot of artists who use textiles in their art. So those type of things, and my magazine is more like it's sewing.
Mm-hmm.
So a majority of it is sewing, but I'm looking for anyone who can create. You will see more African American people in my magazine because that's what I built the magazine on.
Mm-hmm.
But I feature all types of people who can make art. If you can make good art that has a good conversation, I'm all about it. So I look a lot on social media. I Google search. I get word of mouth. I just look everywhere for artists.
Do you just look for traditional proposals? What do people need to do to actually like submit a design or an article idea?
I love it when they submit a proposal so that I can get a grasp on that they know what they're doing. But I get an email, I get a DM like, hey, and I'm like, you know what? I send them my email address, so it's formal, informal, however, we touch base.
And that's really a gift now, because that was a huge barrier, I mean, only a decade ago, is just actually getting eyes on. And now everybody's so much more accessible because of social media. You can DM everyone. That doesn't mean they're going to get back to you, but you're a heck of a lot closer than when you had to, rely on fax machines, or whatever.
Absolutely, because I know from submitting my own proposals to other people, I know it's not as easy as it is for someone to touch base with me to get their work out there.
Yeah. Amy, what about Knitty? What do you look for? What are you asking for as far as submissions go? Articles? You're doing less articles now, right?
Well, no, actually, things have gotten shaken. We shook things up a little bit over the last month, and there's going to be a renewed focus on quality instructional features.
Oh, so this is like hot breaking news.
Oh, absolutely. So features are especially about a technique. It's something we haven't already covered. We'd love to see, or an updated, better version would be awesome. We have a YouTube channel now with some people following it, which is great. So we've got content there that's mostly instructional. With the way Knitty has always worked for the last 20 years is that we get a full submission, which means pictures of a completed garment from all angles, usually good enough to be put in the magazine, but if not, it comes before publication.
So you don't need to choose the yarns, or a color palette or anything.
People make things they want to wear most of the time.
Okay.
That's how Knitty started out. They were making these things for themselves anyway.
That's a unique perspective that Knitty has.
Yeah, it's like hopefully a potluck, like a creative potluck. And we never know what we're going to get. And we do have a couple of ringers. We tend to get a Barocco and a Universal Yarns pattern every issue so that we know we have some good solid anchor patterns. But everything else is, we don't always know it's coming till it's there. I didn't know the Florabunda blanket the Florabundance has these lovely 3D flowers. Did not know it was coming in until 2 weeks before we went live.
That one is a lot of work. It is so beautiful, but my mind was blown to just think about the time that went into that.
It's just 480 of these 3D crocheted flowers that she did 2 or 3 a day for a year. And next thing you know, she has an Afghan to cover a bed. But that's part of the point. That one of the reasons is we're not a print magazine. We can work very close to publication. Not so close that I make my staff crazy, but it can be close. And so something can come in 3 weeks before, and if the tech editor can fit it in, everything else, because of the way it's a complete submission, it's already in my folder. I don't have to wait for
And you're a digital publication, so you don't have any of the sort of time.
No, and we have no cost implications either, which is great. And if something, God forbid, I was a proofreader for 20 years.
Yeah.
And if something's wrong in print, it's a lot more expensive than it is to go fix it on my website in 2 seconds.
Sure. Do you consider there to be a design aesthetic for Knitty, or is it really like more community based is the focus?
Well, everything is always going to be through my eyes at first, because I have a team of 3 people and we have very different styles. I mean, Kate is New York and black, and Jillian is like boho, and I'm 1980s and I never sort of move forward. So
hey, that's
always the joke, right? cropped things with puffy,
I
whatever.
mean, those are hot right now.
That's what I'm saying. You
Look what Megan's wearing.
Yeah, this is what I'm saying. So the aesthetic, we try to make it timeless but current. Like it can't just be a rectangle. It has to have some kind of interesting twist in the construction. And the trouble with being around for 20 years is that, we've already had a lot of those things kind of invented and published.
Yeah.
Like, there's only so many times you can publish a knitted womb, although all of a sudden I think we'll be
we need
knitting
that
some
knitted
more
womb.
of those. It's
Yeah.
another story. But there are always new surprises, and for a while we would have 2 or 3 new sock constructions published in an issue. So still, after all that, there are more different sock constructions we haven't even seen yet. Right now, the goal is just to keep it looking fresh, the kind of thing you wish was already in your closet.
Yeah.
So it ends up being very timely. And if you go back over the older issues, it's surprising how little of it looks dated. Some things absolutely do, but some things you could absolutely do now.
Yeah, like with my guitar strap that has maybe fun fur around the edge.
Fun for
Maybe a little bit dated.
moment.
Maybe a little bit dated. Megan, what about folks that would like to submit for PPQ? What do you look for? You have a very specific aesthetic. What do people need to know when they're to have success with submitting with you?
Yeah, like a well put together proposal, like you said, is like a dream.
What does that mean though? Like,
that
let's
means
break
that
that
you
down.
have attention to detail. It means that you've thought out the design. It means that you're serious about it, and that means that we can trust you, to meet deadlines and all that kind of stuff. It's a really good sign. And I cannot draw. And I ask everybody to send in a sketch of their designs, but I am not good at that. So it doesn't have to be perfect, but it just has to show something unique. First of all, is what we're looking for, and then we have a theme for every issue, a really clear, specific theme. And so it's always good if it feels like the design really fits that theme, because sometimes I think designers might have some ideas stored up that they might send to lots of different places, and sometimes that's fine and it might actually fit the theme on that occasion. But yeah, just we make it really clear on our submission page what we want to see in the submission, and if we see that somebody has checked all those boxes, then that's an amazing sign. And
what would you say the aesthetic of the magazine is? The overall?
Well, we like color, so that's a big thing. But I don't know. Joyful is the first word that comes to mind for the magazine. We like to be happy about knitting.
Yeah. And modern and clean and beautiful and
Thank
accessible.
you.
I think. If I could add some, if I could throw those in. Michelle, what about you? We already talked to you.
Yep.
We heard from you. Ashley, what about you? What are you looking for when you're?
Yeah, so we actually just recently shifted. So we do an open call for each issue, and what ends up happening is we get a ton of designs, and we're really clear on the submission page, a proposal is great. And the proposal not only lets us know that you'll be able to deliver this thing, but also helps us kind of get the vision, because we also have themes, and helps us understand okay, as a finished piece, they don't always come in the proposals, but it helps us kind of get a clear vision of what the end issue will be and how we can cohesively plan the photo shoot and all the different aspects that will come together. So very similar to Pom Pom in terms of and SEWN in terms of a proposal is great. I think the biggest issue that we've run into is that because we really want to have diverse, contributors within the magazine, often the proposals we get are mostly white women, and so where before we used to hand curate and go seek out contributors, now we've realized that people of color and people of different identities, they need to feel welcome and they need to feel invited. And often that's what it takes, is to like go out and say, we want you in this magazine. Like, would you want to be a part of this with us? And like giving them the option, of course, but that takes a lot more work to go do. We can't just expect all that to come into our inbox. And so I would say that's been one of the challenges of like proposals, but I do see shifting over time. Like I've already seen a difference over the last couple of years. So,
Are any or all of you open to new designers, or do you?
That's what we do.
That's what you do.
That's
Knitty,
what we've
that's
done
that's
since
what
day
you do.
one. Yeah,
So people shouldn't feel intimidated by.
No, especially, I mean, if we're your starting platform, that's fine. A lot of people did it that way. But everything we want from you is always laid out, and we've started doing mood boards, so that gives you an idea. But right now we just want really good work, and we've published like people in grade 9. I don't really care if you make a great pattern, and then that's what we want. So we are absolutely open to newbies.
Okay. Everybody else?
Definitely.
Open it if
Yeah.
it's good. They're into it. I wanted to touch on something else that's been happening in our industry for most of the time of my career, and that's the commodification of projects and patterns. It's a challenge for us as designers. It's a challenge for print media, especially. Would any of you be open to talking about what you're doing to help sort of prevent the commodification of patterns within your own publication, but also what work you're doing to pay a livable wage to designers who now have a hard time getting paid because there is so much free content? Just a little light subject, so go ahead, take it.
I mean, I feel like I will never feel like I am paying designers enough.
Yeah.
And we've increased our fees every year for 10 years, but it never feels like enough. Like I used to, before I started Pom Pom, design patterns, and it's a lot of work. And then you have price increases on everything, and you want your product to be accessible to the community. You don't want it to be, price people out of being able to buy your products, but you also need to pay people fairly. I don't think I have the answer.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if there is.
Yeah.
It's just that work and awareness that we can be doing is always. I mean, really, I think a lot of it is about educating the people that are buying your product about why they should pay for a pattern when there's other stuff for free.
Well, maybe I could talk to the free.
Yeah. Do it.
My magazine has been free since 2002. It's always going to be free, except it's not free. You just don't pay for it. I don't mean that as you, just one does not pay for it. In the beginning, we all worked for free for the first year. In second year onwards, we took advertising. In 2015, after the advertising had dropped off significantly, I went to Patreon. And so that means we have ongoing funding every quarter for people who support us. And that covers 3/4 of our costs. So, that still means that magazine is being paid for.
Yeah.
And it's free, and I've learned a lot from watching other people who are supported in this patronage model, where you get to do what you do, and those who can't afford don't pay, but those who can do. And as long as that number, whatever it is, stays sort of the same, your costs are covered. You make a living, you do whatever you do with your budget, and the product keeps coming out, and so that's why those people support you, because they know they're going to get the thing. The fact that it's free means that anybody can play with it, and if they don't like the pattern, they don't feel bad in themselves that they spent their $5 or $10. That's a separate issue. But it allows it for experimentation, and that way it's been helpful for us. But it's not like someone who just gives their work away on a weekend and then all of a sudden jumps up to the top of Ravelry because they've given away all their patterns for 2 days. That is hard on regular designers who can't afford to do things like that.
Yeah, we had talked about this on our Zoom ahead of time. I was doing some work pre-pandemic that unfortunately crashed and burned, but I was trying to work with both TNNA and what was formerly the Craft Yarn Council, about having what I was going to call the Fair Fiber Collective. I think what we need to do is we need to educate consumers the same way that the cotton industry has, where you have like that symbol on the label. That means because people don't know if a pattern is free if that person, if the person that designed it was paid or not. They're being paid with that.
Yeah.
So if we have this symbol that's on it that says this pattern was, the person was paid a livable wage, it was tech edited, there's clear photography, and it's maybe sized accessibly, we have to workshop it. I think that if we go that way, we can take a step, because how are people supposed to know if Mary Jo's blog, like, that gives free stuff all the time, is any different from Knitty? Like, how are people supposed to know that? And so I think that's something as an industry that we could do better. But I think that jump on in. Yeah.
This is a topic that I'm kind of passionate about. So I think a lot about this, because as we're building the app, one of the problems that we're trying to solve is, I think we often look at this as like educating the consumer, but I don't think that's the only thing. I think that as designers, as people in the industry, it's getting harder and harder to make money doing this. And it always has been hard. And so I had this realization recently, and it's not really a new one, but it just really hit me really hard, is that part of the struggle for the consumer is also that they don't have time to make everything that's in a magazine. And the more that our costs go up, or the more that we're able to pay designers or whatever that is, the value to them starts diminishing because of time, because of money, because of whatever it is. And so I kind of see it as like a two-sided issue, and not just about educating the consumer, but creating opportunity on the seller side, like on the designer side as well. And so I don't have like a one blanket solution, but in the past, designers would teach classes, designers would sell patterns, and maybe have a partnership with a yarn brand or a fabric brand. And it is moving away from that in the traditional model, and more where they're needing to build their own brand. They're needing to take on this own responsibility. And I think as a magazine, one of the things that we've shifted is away from just continuing to highlight the same designers, but like using it as an educational place to help someone boost their brand, like as they're getting started, so that maybe they don't need to be in making again next time. Maybe they have a big enough name through, being in making in other places where
to be a platform.
Where they can start their own business. I mean, because that is the real thing, is like designers need more ways to make money besides just patterns. And how do we do that? How can we help that, I guess, as a publication? Yeah.
Well, I would love to take the last, 10 minutes or so and open it up for questions. Designers, this is your time. You've got people in front of you willing to listen, local yarn shops, anything. Do we have any questions? There's a mic, and you can take it down and pass it if you don't want to stand up. Do you want to grab it and then?
Hi, my name's Jen. I am a designer, and I have a couple of questions that I'm just really curious about, because I don't have insight.
Is it in and out?
I think if you just hold it closer.
Closer? Okay.
Yeah, there you go.
Because I don't have any insight from the publication side. So I do a lot of work in size inclusion. There are changes I would like to see across the industry. It's a very important topic to me. But there are two things that I see happening in publications that I don't have insight on, and I'm hoping you can help me be more informed on those. One is, I want to see knitters in every size have a perfectly fitted pattern. And there's so many constraints in paper publication with the amount of space that's allowed, that's permissible for the sorts of instructions you need to get those fit for the largest and smallest sizes. So I'd love to hear something about that. And then the other part is the amount of time that designers have to turn a pattern around. And it seems like that hasn't changed much over the last 5 years, as the industry has started to demand more from designers in terms of complex fit and and just in terms of like nuanced details, pattern writing. So that's my questions.
I can speak a little bit to the size inclusion thing and print space. I was talking to my former book editor about this in the future, and we can help that. I think we can help that, and also bridge the digital print gap by printing whatever size is, and then there's a QR code that takes you to a much bigger, like a meatier pattern that might talk about measuring and then go to, you know, size 5XL or whatever the yarn standards are right now and that kind of thing. And then it saves costs on printing, but it also sort of like gives bridges a gap. But somebody that actually runs a magazine should.
Yeah, but we do that.
You do
Yeah.
that? Okay, yeah.
We do that with charts if charts are too big also. That's the nice thing about being able to do both. And then in terms of time, we are always trying to increase our lead times, always. I mean, there's a fine line because you still, like as a magazine, you want to be a little bit like,
Fresh.
like not cutting edge necessarily, but you know, you want to like, you know, not do it so far in advance that maybe you lose some of the like zeitgeist that people want in a magazine. So we're trying to find a balance. I'd be really interested to know how long you think is a good time.
Yeah.
For me, what I think is, you know, I've seen deadlines that are like a month, right? And that's fine if you're, or even 6 weeks, right? So if you have like 3 weeks to write and grade something in 12 sizes so it fits a bust that goes from 28 to 72 inches, then you also have to add knitting time. And I feel like when you only have 6 weeks to design and knit the sample, that puts a lot of downward pressure on everyone to choose a smaller model.
Absolutely,
Oh,
and
a
that's
great
part
point.
of
Yeah.
increasing our lead times is also having time to knit larger samples.
Do all of your publications require the designer to do the grading? Like Vogue Knitting, you just submit, they don't want you to size it because it's more work for them to work backwards, you know, and check math, so they do all the grading. But do you all expect it to come in graded?
We do. That's one of the things that we shifted in order to be able to diversify the people in the magazine. Was we were finding that a lot of newer designers didn't have those skills, and so we do have an in-house grader. So it's really up to the designer.
Yeah.
But what I was going to say on the time, it is kind of a double-edged sword. We're only twice a year, so it gives more time. But then we run into the issue where like you're not going to see your pattern in print for like a year.
Yeah.
From when we, you know, and so, but it does help. Like it gives more time, you know, overall. But yeah.
Do you have people pre-grade or do you?
It depends.
Depends.
Yeah. Typically, people grade their own patterns, but if they need help, then it's there. Yeah.
Michelle, what about you?
I'm different. I don't have any of those type patterns in my magazine.
Okay.
Yeah, and we right now everybody provides their own grading. We are considering working a little bit more to the making model depending on how things are going to go in the next year. I think we are losing some of the newer designers because that's a lot to ask.
It's a lot to ask.
Extra small to 6X is a lot of sizes.
It's a lot of. It's a lot. It's for my business Yarnier, we currently have it's 9 sizes, and that's a lot. But there are like 2 or 3 tech editors in the industry that took the grading class. My lead patterns editor, Chaitanya Muralidhara, happens to be one of them. So because I honestly, I don't have the technical skill for that. It's not about anything other than that. So you have to seek out those people and also be willing to give that as a resource to designers, like, you know, so that we can work together to make it happen.
I think I was just going to say the blocks change. And that's the biggest issue that we've seen is for sewing. And Julie and I'm going to call you out. We've had a lot of talks about this because we actually don't really, not trust, but we don't really want to put in the hands of a designer who's only ever designed up to a certain chest size. Ask them to then grade for larger sizes and not do it the way that it should be done because the arm circumference, everything changes as sizes get bigger. And so it's something that we've slowly been figuring out, like what is the best way to do it. And it often means like having our tech editor literally cut out the pattern, sew the pattern, or knit the pattern and figure out if that grading worked or do it a different way. So it's pretty intensive.
If you have a monthly publication, like that's an impossibility.
It's really hard, and we need more solutions, which is like why
more solutions.
Julie, I'm gonna give her a plug here, has like a tech editing and like a whole class series that she does on this, on like educating
so we
designers.
need more people to be educated on that
Absolutely.
so that we can employ them and make that happen for sure, because it is a skill. Because I worked a lot with Carla Scott from Vogue Knitting, and she's one of the few people that actually like went to school for this, and she just said it's part art, part science, because just because you're bigger here doesn't mean that you have bigger shoulders. Just because you might be bigger here doesn't mean that you have a longer torso. So it's a complex thing, but it's something that we really, really need to focus on, and I think hopefully are. Is there any last questions before? Yeah, we have time for one more.
Hi, thank you guys. So this is a question for folks who take submissions that are very much theme-based. Do you find that when you have a very specific prompt that you end up with a lot of patterns that look very similar or take the prompt in the same literal sort of ways, or do you find that you get a really great variety of, I guess my question sort of is, when you choose those patterns, are you saying like, oh, I had 10 people who did a thing like this, I'm going to choose the best of them, or are you not really seeing that at all?
For certain themes, we definitely get a lot of designs that are kind of the same. So it's really good if you can kind of think outside the box about the theme. Our theme for next summer is fruit. So I'm like, okay, I'm expecting a lot of orange slices. So like, don't send an orange slice of any kind. But people are so different and diverse and creative that we do get enough different ideas and interpretations of ideas that it's not really a problem, but you might just want to think about it when you're submitting designs, like, what won't they see that will stand out?
Yeah. I would say the same. It doesn't really feel like we get too many of the same, but what might happen is like, oh, we had a pattern like that in a previous issue that was like somewhat recent that we don't want to like replicate. Oh, we just had a knit tank, or we just had this. But we want makers and designers to have the freedom to submit whatever they're inspired to submit, so we try to give like guidance through the mood board. But at the end of the day, we have to just like decide what works. We are moving away from themes next year, and so it'll be interesting. We have different ways that we're gonna do submissions and stuff, but one of the reasons was because we find ourselves like it's hard to create a cohesive issue sometimes, when you're gathering all these different crafts and styles and things like that, and we really want to kind of try something new,
Yeah.
I would also add that sometimes because we get designs that can be similar, but we love them both, we have to make a choice between different designs. So if there ever is a time that you don't get accepted to a magazine, that doesn't mean that there was something wrong with your design, or and like in Pom Pom, there's like maybe like 12 designs in any one issue, and we might get over 100 submissions, and there are so many that we would love to be able to commission, but it's all these moving parts, like how many accessories do we have, how many garments do we have, and just because your design was not accepted that time does not mean that there's anything wrong with you or your design. It just wasn't the right fit for that particular issue. So if you are willing to send us more the next time, then they're very, very welcome.
One thing I did want to say based on earlier, when you submit a proposal, don't make the whole thing. No. Like, if and
it's the opposite.
Yeah, I know it's the opposite for her, but
because the yarn support, you might have deals with yarn
and
companies
it
or
breaks my heart
fabric.
to say no to someone who's like knit
I
the
know,
whole thing. Yeah.
and it's like, don't do free work. Like a proposal can literally, if you're inspired, it can literally take you like 10 minutes. Like it doesn't have to be super fancy, like we just need to get the vision of like
and
what
often
you're
there might
talking
be
about.
tweaks too. They might say like, we love this, but we need it to be longer, or we need this, or we have to do it in this yarn because we have this deal with it, whatever. So
if you if it gets rejected or not accepted, I mean, it's impossible to, because we have however many in each issue and get hundreds and hundreds, right? But like, don't do free work. Don't. Because it's not going to get you any closer to like getting the
And also, if we
magazine.
continue to work for free, it's going to be accepted as the norm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
Thank you, everyone. just a reminder that we are a business with the majority share are women or non-binary folk with uteruses. Please be kind to one another and support one another during this horrendous time. I appreciate it. I appreciate you. Thank you for being here.